All right, I do blame Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle, stain of humanity. Yes, Meghan, and I hope you're watching right now. I hope you're watching, Meghan, because you are the stain of humanity.
I don't think that she'll ever let Harry go, because she is so fixated on having a title that she doesn't even have or deserve anymore, right? Yeah. Technically, she's not part of the royal family. On paper, on the website, Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And I think that's her biggest, that's anybody's biggest mistake in their entire life, to screw that up.
In December, Meghan Markle was presenting herself as the embodiment of compassion. Carefully produced videos emphasized balance, healing, and family, introducing a lifestyle brand rooted in warmth and authenticity to a global audience. But while that image was rolling out, something far more serious was unfolding off-camera. Halfway across the world, her father was undergoing emergency surgery after a sudden medical crisis turned life-threatening. At 81 years old, doctors were forced to amputate his leg. The situation was critical. And during that time, Meghan did not appear at his bedside. There were no public calls, no visible visits, only distance, managed quietly through representatives. That contrast is what made this story ignite. Not because of tabloids or rumors, but because of who decided to speak next, someone from inside the family. Long before wedding headlines and palace drama, there was a warning nearly everyone ignored. In early 2018, just weeks before the marriage, Thomas Markle Jr. released an open letter addressed directly to Prince Harry. It was blunt, uncomfortable, and impossible to soften. He described Meghan as calculated and controlling, warning that marrying her would lead to isolation, conflict, and lasting damage. At the time, the reaction was dismissive. Media framed him as bitter, irrelevant, or desperate for attention. Supporters waved it off as an estranged relative trying to sabotage a fairy tale. The letter became a punchline, not a prophecy.
Prince Harry wanted to make amends and come meet my dad. Wow, that's just crazy. I'll tell you right now, Prince Harry, if it has to do with anything with the Netflix crew and cameras, don't even bother. My dad's had enough crap from bogus PR stunts to last him for the rest of his
life. But what made it different was its precision. It outlined patterns of behavior, not vague fears. And once the wedding passed, those patterns didn't fade, they accelerated. When people revisit that letter today, what stands out isn't its tone, it's its accuracy. Thomas Markle Jr. warned that the marriage would isolate Harry, fracture his family ties, and create constant conflict. Almost immediately after the wedding, those fractures became visible. Tension with Prince William and Kate surfaced, followed by distancing within the palace. Then came the rupture, a complete departure from royal duties. What followed was not peace, but escalation. Lawsuits, interviews, documentaries, and public battles that turned allies into adversaries. Staff relationships collapsed. Long-standing bonds burned quickly. This wasn't a single misunderstanding. It was a repeating pattern: control of narrative, intolerance of criticism, and framing disagreement as betrayal. The warning hadn't been a guess. It was pattern recognition. Between 2004 and 2011, there is a stretch of Meghan Markle's life that remains unusually thin on detail. Officially, the story is familiar: a Northwestern graduate, struggling actress, small roles, and persistence in Los Angeles. But parallel to that narrative, another reality appears. Photos surfaced showing Meghan on luxury yachts in the Mediterranean, at exclusive events in Monaco and southern Europe, surrounded by wealthy, powerful men. These were not casual vacations. They were tightly controlled.
Do you sense that maybe trouble may lay ahead?
I've always thought that. Honestly, I've always thought that because, not that I want to bring up the fact that I wrote that letter, but I wrote that letter a long time ago in hindsight of her.
Invitation-only environments, far removed from the world of struggling performers. The images exist. The access was real. What's missing is the explanation. Who funded these trips? Who made the introductions? That silence is where the questions begin. In elite circles, yacht culture isn't about leisure, it's about access. These environments operate on invitation, not chance. Guests are brought in through owners, sponsors, or powerful intermediaries. Travel and accommodations are facilitated, not self-funded by people trying to break into acting. Presence signals value. Repeated access signals relationship. This context matters because it explains why the images raise questions without making accusations. When access appears without explanation, speculation fills the gap, not out of malice, but because the public narrative no longer aligns with what's visible. That's why insiders matter. They don't speculate. They remember. The real turning point wasn't a headline or a photograph, it was a hospital room. In late 2025, Thomas Markle Sr. was rushed into emergency surgery after losing circulation to his leg. Doctors had no choice but to amputate. At 81, with a history of serious health issues, survival itself was uncertain. During those critical days, one person was physically present. Thomas Markle Jr. He handled doctors, fear, and recovery firsthand. Meghan's response, by contrast, remained distant. No visits. No visible outreach. Any communication was filtered through representatives. Watching a parent fight for their life changes how silence feels. For Thomas Jr., this wasn't about public image, it was about loyalty. And in that moment, something shifted. What continues...
So, Neil Sean put out a video yesterday or the day before saying that Meghan and Harry are on the rocks. Well, I think I called that quite a bit ago, and Prince Harry, I told you it was coming. Anyway, the video said that
to stand out isn't what's been said, it's what hasn't. Despite years of resurfaced photos and repeated questions, Meghan has never directly addressed the yacht rumors. No clarification. No context. Her team hasn't denied them either. They've remained silent. Silence is powerful. When claims are false, context usually ends the conversation. But silence allows assumptions to grow, especially when it overlaps with missing years. Interviews skim past that period. Records are thin. The story jumps forward without fully connecting the dots. When one reality is visible and another is presented without explanation, curiosity isn't malicious. It's inevitable. And unanswered questions don't disappear. They wait. If Thomas Markle Jr.'s book does move forward, the consequences extend beyond headlines. Meghan's public identity is built on authenticity, on struggle, growth, and earned wisdom. That narrative underpins her brand, partnerships, and credibility. If key years are shown to be more curated than acknowledged, that foundation weakens. Brands invest in story as much as popularity. When the story shifts, trust becomes fragile. And then there's Prince Harry. He defended Meghan at great personal cost. If new information suggests there were aspects of her past he didn't fully understand, questions about judgment inevitably follow. Not out of cruelty, but realism. First-hand testimony doesn't behave like rumor. Once details are named, the narrative changes permanently. This story was never really about gossip. It's about who controls the narrative, and for how long.
Raise uncomfortable questions that haven't gone away.
Do you sense that maybe trouble may lay ahead?
I've always thought that. Honestly, I've always thought that because, not that I want to bring up the fact that I wrote that letter, but I wrote that letter a long time ago in hindsight of her saying something about me.
4 years, silence worked. The gaps remained, but they stayed in the background. Now that balance may be shifting. Thomas Markle Jr. isn't reacting from the outside. He witnessed the early years before branding, before PR, before controlled messaging. He doesn't rely on archived posts or leaked photos, he relies on memory. And once first-hand testimony enters the conversation, silence stops being protection. It becomes vulnerability. Narratives don't collapse all at once. They fracture slowly, when unanswered questions finally meet answers. And that leaves one question hanging. When someone who watched it all decides to speak, does the image survive?